But pretty much anytime we use a growth promoting technology, it's going to focus on lean deposition, muscle deposition. And it's oftentimes going to be counter to fat deposition.
Welcome to MeatsPad. In collaboration with the American Meat Science Association, it's a platform dedicated to share breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the global meat industry. On each episode, you'll have the opportunity to listen and learn from meat specialists and professionals about the whole meat industry. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation,
U.S. Pork,
Ultrasource, equipment and supplies for the meat and food industry.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. My name is Najar. I'm your host today, my co-host today. We have a topic that we kind of visited this year about meat quality with Dr. Bass, and we'll like to revisit about this topic. Dr. Bass, how are you today?
Great. How are you, Francisco?
Just before recording, I bombarded you with a lot of questions that I've been getting from small meat processors on how to enhance meat quality, how to get a more tender product. But I think we can start right away. I think, as I said in the beginning, we kind of visited about some of the general factors that impact meat quality. We talk about branding. We talk about many things, but I think we can narrow it down to simple and concise instructions, if you will, for small meat processors. And I give you an example. I have somebody asked me, hey, out of the beef that I'm killing, I'm getting 20-30% low choice cattle, and I'm getting 60-70% select and standard. What are some simple things that we can do? We can talk about genetics, we can talk about diet, and you're the expert in this topic. Sure. But simple things that the small meat processors, and they're also killing their own animals, can start doing to improve meat quality and get more choice and on the prime high end of the spectrum. So.
Yeah. And I'm grateful that you're talking about some of the real world questions that you're encountering. It's kind of like when people write into our info@meatspad.com, asking these specific questions. And this is a little bit more general, but it's definitely a world that I live in. I have for quite some time now. I wouldn't be an expert on implant protocols, but I'm much more of a theorist and in general kind of discussion. So I definitely want to talk about that. And you sent me some photos of some animals, and the carcasses look fantastic, but the marbling might be less than desirable once we start cutting into those things. And so stuff that needs to be considered as far as finding a good balance of what we're targeting is really, really critical. Most folks are pretty aware that we got to put these animals on a high energy concentrate feed so that we can get that desirable fat on them. And especially if they're coming off of pasture or rangeland, we want the really tasty fats, and so we'll get them on a high energy concentrate feed. Usually about 120 days is around the minimum that you want to do, but I'll tell you, depending on the genetics you have, sometimes 120 days is all you need. I've personally had great experience with really high quality genetics. And when I say high quality genetics, animals that are very predisposed to marbling, and 120 days is really all they need. You end up with about a 1/4 of an inch of back fat, a 900-pound carcass, and high choice and prime marbling. I mean, it can happen. And then the longer you feed that animal, they're going to keep getting bigger, but it's kind of an ideal size in that regard. But if we can put maybe like 150 days or a little bit more on these animals when they're on concentrate feed, that's going to give them the opportunity to continue to deposit fat where it needs to be deposited. I like to give the example, however, of wine and grapes, and if you have crummy grapes, it's hard to make good wine, even with the best management. If you have really good grapes but bad management, it's still hard to make good wine. But if you have good grapes, good management, good soil, good environment, everything that's pointing in the right direction, that's where it becomes very easy to have a high quality product And I feel like that can be translated into just about any agricultural item, but especially especially beef, but other animals as well. If they have the genetic potential for high quality, then it's going to be easier to obtain. And so feeding is absolutely critical. Hitting that kind of more optimal target of minimum 120 days, and then going up from there. If you go much beyond 200 days, usually just end up with a really fat animal. Um, and then you have to have the genetic potential. And so there's definitely breeds of livestock that are going to be more predisposed to a higher quality level. And that doesn't mean that others cannot. It just means that some have a greater disposition to it.
Can you
And
use an
so,
example? Like just
yeah. So example is most often and again, there are always exceptions, right? This is biology, but generally speaking, our British type breeds are going to have a greater potential for marbling. Okay, Angus, Hereford, Shorthorn. I have been seeing quite a bit of really great genetics, high quality marbling potential coming from some of our white breeds now too, like the Charolais, um, and still our traditional European Bos Taurus type breeds. When we get into the Bos Indicus, so our Brahman, our Nelore, our Zebu, those animals do very well in the hotter climates. They can handle the heat well, and so they're going to grow well in those situations. Um, but they do have a tendency to have poorer marbling. That's just how it's been for some time. It's not always the case, but they don't. They just those animals just they don't necessarily perform as well as our more British and European type breeds. So if we can influence, say, a Bos Indicus base with more of a Bos Taurus um, outside influence. So say a great example is the Brangus that are out there, all throughout Florida and the southeast U.S., where you're getting the quality, the higher marbling potential from the Angus breed, but then also you have more of that heat and parasite tolerance from the Bos Indicus. And so kind of finding that marriage has a tendency to be good to help. So
I was giving you an example of some of the traditional methods that processors are doing, and I mentioned some implants, but I think it's good to understand some implants are better than others, and some implants have some impact on tenderness, and I think it's good to have this information. If maybe you're thinking of using implants, or you're already using implants, and you're not getting the better product, you're not getting a highly marble, you got to between the 12 and 13, and say, why am I not getting even 150 days of this high energy diet, but I'm not getting marbling?
Yeah, no. Okay. So you've mentioned a lot right there, and implants are a growth promoting technology that we use in beef cattle. We've been doing it for a very long time, since the 1950s, and are very effective. They're effective at adding another somewhere between 30, 60 pounds of lean on that animal if it was compared to a non-implanted animal. And again, this could vary depending on the protocols and the number of times implanted, but just generally speaking, somewhere in that 30 to 60 pounds. Okay, so we're adding additional pounds. Well, what is that pounds in the form of? It's in the form of lean muscle. So any really growth promoting technology that we have available to us right now, and I say growth promoting technology because it's bigger than implants, but pretty much anytime we use a growth promoting technology, it's going to focus on lean deposition, muscle deposition, and it's oftentimes going to be counter to fat deposition. Now, another great example of a growth promotant that really counters fat deposition, what we also know as a repartitioning agent, are going to be our beta agonists. And so in North America, we have a few beta agonists. The most popular by far right now and have been used in both pigs and in beef is ractopamine. Ractopamine in the form of brand name Paline for pigs, and then brand name Optiflex for beef. And then we have another one known as Zilpaterol, brand name Zilmax, that is also available for beef. And both of those repartitioning agents are fed during the last month or month and a half on feed. And what they do is help redirect nutrients that otherwise could have been going to fat or were already in the form of fat in the animal. And then those nutrients can be broken back apart and help to build muscle, but at the cost of fat deposition, especially with marbling fat, which is the hardest to achieve. And so the more we use growth promoting technologies, which, by the way, I'm a big endorser of growth promoting technologies. I believe they are the reason that we can continue to provide safe, high quality, and affordable meat regularly, is the efficiencies and the efficacies that growth promoting technologies bring. But there's always a balance. And I was just recently talking about this in my class, is that we can maximize, but that doesn't mean that it's the optimal achievement. And what I like to do is try to talk more about optimization and using growth promotants in a very judicious fashion, so that we're still getting some of that additional gain that we can use from growth promoting technology. So beef, steroid hormone implants, some of the feed additives in the form of beta agonists are repartitioning agents. Feed additives in the form of repartitioning agents, beta agonists for pigs. In both cases, we can add more muscle, we can add more lean, but almost always does that come at the cost of fat deposition, and again, the highly desirable fat, the marbling fat. And so finding a happy balance is very critical. And depending on what your target audience is, we need to be very careful with using some of these technologies. If your target audience is high marbling, you may need to back away from some of the growth promoting technologies. It doesn't mean you have to go completely away from it, but less use, and maybe more feed, more time on feed. If it's more you're trying to compete in the market for a leaner product, growth promoting technologies are fantastic and can really help in that category.
Since 1883, Ultrasource has been a trusted supplier to the food industry. Ultrasource provides superior kill floor, processing, packaging, and labeling equipment and operational supplies.
And I think you mentioned something that resonates with me a lot is the balance. And I think so when we talk about meat quality, talk about the organoleptic properties of the product, we need to mention the three most important ones, or the three that Dr. Queen always talks about: tenderness, juiciness, and flavor.
Yep.
And I think it's important to understand how, this growth promotants can have an impact, especially on the tenderness side of things. So maybe if you can elaborate more a little bit on that, we got maybe some confusion. So is it good to be using the growth promotant? But as you said, it may affect the tenderness property of the product. But I think it's good to, because we're not saying you shouldn't be using it. It's just it's I think it's knowledge is power, and it's good to that we know this, right?
That's right. Yeah. So yes, you're absolutely right. I am not saying not to. I'm not completely an endorsement either. It's just use what's best for your business, and then the question has to be, what is the business? What are we targeting? And what do we want to be really good at? I've used growth promotants in the past. I think they're fantastic technologies, and I continue to encourage those who can find a good balance to use those things, because they're safe and very, very effective. But there's always the question of the organoleptic side, and ultimately somebody has to eat this product. And if we're targeting a leaner product for a lower cost, say, and be more competitive in the market that way, then growth promoting technologies are fantastic. But they do impact marbling. And we know that marbling has a tremendous effect on those three properties that you mentioned: flavor, tenderness, and juiciness. Flavor, that's what unique species specific compounds are going to be found. Okay. Beef tastes like beef because of beef fat. Lamb fat tastes like lamb because of lamb fat. Pork tastes like pork fat, so that kind of stuff. So, okay. So that's one of the things where the marbling comes in. Flavor, tenderness. Marbling is less dense than the muscle surrounding it. It melts. It helps to prevent the over travel of heat. So it slows the migration of heat. And so you don't have a tendency to overcook product, which can lead to toughness. Okay. So there's a variety of different ways where marbling can achieve a tenderness effect. It melts and it creates a lubrication factor on our teeth.
Lubrication.
So that helps us to bite through it. And then the juiciness, because it melts, even if the meat is cooked to a higher degree of doneness, that marbling remains. And so you still get a perception of juiciness. So marbling is very, very effective at the overall palatability. And as you've mentioned, Dr. O'Quinn has at Kansas State University, Dr. Travis O'Quinn has done a lot of research, just kind of looking at how does marbling affect those three properties. And so if we do impact the level of marbling within meat, it's likely going to impact that final eating experience. However, it's not 100%, but it does. Marbling really does make a big impact in that. And so back to the idea of, well, how are we managing these animals? If we're using growth promoting technologies, they're going to grow bigger. There's also this thing called a dilution factor. So if you think of a chocolate chip cookie that has 10 little chocolate chips in there. And then if we use a growth promoting technology, well, the same number of chocolate chips are in there, but now the cookie's much bigger. And so it doesn't look like there's quite as much. Each bite won't have the same number of chocolate in it, so to say. And so the idea being, it's now diluted the marbling that was there. And if we're using repartitioning agents, it may actually take away some marbling, because of the way that the hormone sensitive lipases work in the muscle cell and everything. And so we might be losing some of that marbling. But again, it's a balance. If we have really high quality genetics, growth promoting technologies work really, really well together with that. If we're working with genetics that are unknown, we need to be more careful with using the growth promoting technologies, because the animal may not be predisposed to marbling, and so we might miss out. And then finally, the growth promotants do oftentimes have an effect on the muscle fiber itself, the muscle cells themselves, and some will tell the muscle to not break down as easily. Muscle's always breaking down. Okay, and so that's where the idea of the calpains and calpastatin comes in, and that's another discussion for another time. But some of these growth promoting technologies may limit the muscle breakdown under natural circumstances, and so that may result in a less tender item as well. So you got to find out what it is you're targeting.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think something that I also was asked about yield.
Mm-hmm.
And from your experience, do we have any impact on yield, like comparing growth promoting and like non-growth promoting? Is there any effect on yield that they also have to be aware of?
Yes, absolutely. So the growth promotants are excellent at improving red meat yield. That's what they do. So you may lose some marbling fat, but you may also get more muscle instead of additional subcutaneous fat and seam fat on those carcasses. And so as far as red meat yield, if you're looking to get more meat per animal, growth promotants are effective and very, very good at that. And that's where finding that happy balance, because the red muscle weighs more than fat, and we want that. And so, and we sell animals by the pound, we sell the meat by the pound, or by the kilo, or by the gram, or however, wherever you may be listening to this right now. We sell it by the weight, and more weight on those, on the hooves of those animals means more money in the pocket for the producer. But there's that balance, because if we can produce a higher quality carcass that's going to result in a better eating experience for the final end user, but then also be able to raise that animal very efficiently and get a bigger animal at the same time, well, that's the holy grail. Sometimes it's counter, though. When we're using more of the growth promotants, we may lose some of the fats, and so therefore we have to expect that maybe our marbling potential won't be as great as if we didn't.
Yeah, and it's important you keep mentioning what's your target audience. Who's your customer? Is your customer looking at a highly marbled product? Is your customer only making ground beef? I mean, it really varies on what your ultimate customer is, and how you can go back to see, should I manage? Should I add this? Should I remove this?
Get really good at what you do, and figure out who your customer is and what they're looking for. And then focus on that, and then diversify beyond there. But this kind of is a message for those who maybe are considering a branding type program, and thinking about putting your face on there, and saying, this is our product. I want you to recognize the brand, but then I also want you to recognize the product that's within that brand. And some of the most successful brands out there, and my previous employer, Certified Angus Beef, has a very, very consistent product that the customer base has come to know very well, and can connect back to the actual logo and the brand, and it's important to have the limiting factors of entrance into that brand. And so for those who maybe have a smaller operation, you're considering branding, you start out with a higher end, and greater restrictions going into your particular product that you want to put your name and face on, and sell that, and that's great. But if something does not fit within your specifications, you have to be disciplined, and you can't just allow just anything to go in there and represent your product. You need to still exclude things that you don't believe is ideal for your particular brand or product. That stuff still has an audience. It still has a customer, but that's where you just sell it into kind of a general commodity commercial avenue. Whereas your branded product, which is kind of your target, I suppose, but your branded product needs to still have that extreme consistency. And so everything still gets sold. It's just, which avenue does it end up in?
I hope this information has reached a lot of people, and especially I will for sure be sharing this link to a lot of customers and a lot of friends that have asked this question about growth promotants, implants, and those on different kinds that you mentioned. Thank you, Dr. Bass, for your time again.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if you want to add something and before we finish off, but I think it's good. I mean, we talk about what kinds we have, some of the limitations, so some advantages of this of using growth implants. And I think we mentioned, I think at some point we mentioned with Dr. John Gonzalez from UGA, University of Georgia, we talk about this, but we focus it more on pigs and pork, not on beef. But I think getting it to the point where we give this information because we have customers that are selling and are really affected by, if it's not highly marble, I'm not going to purchase this. And it might not be the case for folks in the U.S., but like case in Mexico, Central America, South America, there are folks that have invested in better genetics, invested in a highly marble product or things to enhance meat quality, per se, and something like a growth promotant, something like not aging your meat appropriately, I mean, can have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about aging in the past, and we can retouch that another time. No, you've said it all though, because sometimes we just need to get some good high quality protein in the diet and out there to the customers, and to do that more affordably, using growth promotants is excellent. When you begin to have the more discerning palates and the people with greater expendable income, that's where maybe backing away from growth promotants and focusing heavier on some of the more as many of the those in the seed stock world would say, the bells and whistles, the additional things that will enhance the overall final product. So yeah, it's finding that balance, and yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Oh, and well, and one other thing, I regularly mention and talk about this in my meat science classes, but it's the theory can be applied to any of the species. It's not just beef, and I've mentioned pork, but the greater amounts of growth promoting technologies, the more lean muscle will achieve, and that's a good thing from yield perspective and lower cost of production. We just have to find that balance and find out what our customers really want.
Thank you again. We'll see you guys next time. If you have some questions or more questions for us, please send us some email at info@meatspad.com. Thank you.
Thanks.